Hey there friendos, Newbornkilik here, welcoming you back to another awesome review-related video. This time we're going to be talking about the Back 4 Blood beta, which ended just a couple days ago. First off, you might be asking, what in the world is Back 4 Blood? Back 4 Blood is basically the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. And right at the top of the video, I'm going to say that it does scratch that itch for me. It's been a long time since I played Left 4 Dead, and Back 4 Blood was honestly a very welcome addition to my video game repertoire. We'll go over the exact gameplay in a little bit, but just bear in mind if you did play the beta that I didn't play any of the PvP, so this is just kind of a general overview of the PvE elements of the game, or the campaign of the game. Starting off with the characters, note that they all bring something to the team. Evangelo's kind of the solo runner, he can break out of a grab every 60 seconds. Holly is the bruiser, she gets stamina back from eliminating Ridden, which means that she can swing even more with that nasty ass looking bat of hers. Walker, which gives the team a passive damage buff. Mom, which is kind of like the medic of the beta. She's the closest thing that we have to a medic without the actual character Doc, which we'll be releasing with the full game. And Hoffman, which is very useful in keeping the team topped up on ammunition. They all add a nice little team element to the game and are pretty good as far as characters go in these sorts of games. Now, bear in mind, I didn't really tap into the lore too much whenever I was playing. I was looking to run and, just mow down some Ridden, or zombies, they're called Ridden in this game. But I didn't really touch the lore too much, but the banter between the characters was quite good. Speaking of something that is, I would say, less good, we have the enemies. We have the Stinger, the Reeker, the Tall Boy, the Sleeper, and the Ogre. In the campaign beta, those are the only enemies that you will find. Of these enemies, the Stinger, Reeker, and Tall Boy all have 3 different variants. These will do things such as emulate, the Left 4 Dead Hunter. The Stinger has a variant where they can emulate the Hunter. I never actually saw that anywhere in the beta, which is a bummer because I thought that the Sleeper was actually the replacement for the Hunter, and I thought that was really weird, but admittedly, the casual group that I played with didn't even really know that there were variants of these enemies to begin with. We just pinged them and sometimes the characters would say different things, which just goes to show how much of a problem this potentially could be. So we have these 3 unique enemies in the Stinger, Reeker, and Tall Boy, and then they all have these 3 variants, which means that there's quite a bit of diversity as far as Ridden, special enemies here, but we couldn't tell the difference. And admittedly, we didn't really go into the lore too much, and we would just notice that sometimes they were doing different things. Like, I know the Crusher will grab you, and the other one will kind of just like flail his fists around. These are both variants of the Tall Boy, by the way, but they look almost identical. It's big, tall guy with massive right arm coming at you. Overall, while I'm interested in the enemy variant thing, lore-wise, I would say gameplay-wise, it's kind of boring. Now bear in mind that in the final release there will be more enemies. We've seen a couple more enemies in the trailers, such as the Worm-Ridden, I don't know exactly what its name is, along with the Snitcher. They're called a Snitcher or a Snitch or something like that. There will be more enemy variety in the final game naturally. Basically, beta's gonna beta. Onto the general gameplay, there are 2 campaigns in one for a total of 8 levels that you can play through. You take the role of what are known as cleaners fighting what are known as Ridden, or basically survivors and zombies. The general idea is that you're going to want to all stay together and navigate quickly, but also very carefully to the end of each level. Sticking together is very important, but not as important as it was in Left 4 Dead. In Left 4 Dead, if you were alone, there was a pretty damn good chance that you were going to get pinned by something and killed almost immediately. That doesn't really seem to be the case, at least not in Survivor or Veteran difficulty. This definitely can happen, and in Veteran it happens a lot more often, as there's more special infected basically to screw you over. But in Survivor, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You're not really going to be posed much of a threat. The basic gameplay loop is going to be get to a crescendo moment, activate something, fight off a horde, move on about your day. Speaking of the different difficulties in the game, we have 3 of them. They are Survivor, Veteran, and Nightmare. Survivor is just kind of an easy mode, and it's really not a problem. It's actually very difficult to take the enemies seriously in Survivor mode, in my opinion. As long as you're playing as a team and no one's running and gunning, as long as you're all 4 sticking together, you should be able to make it through Survivor mode, no problem. With that in mind, there is a steep difficulty incline in Veteran. I feel like Veteran's where the game really starts to become, well, the game. The difficulty jump from Survivor to Veteran, as I mentioned, is quite big. you're going to be taking a lot more of what is known as trauma damage. Trauma damage is a huge deal in Back 4 Blood, and one of the mechanics that is actually very different from Left 4 Dead. Trauma damage is basically permanent damage done to your character. You can think of it like scar tissues or anything that you like, but basically when you use a bandage or a med kit, you're only going to be able to heal up a certain percentage of your health. Trauma damage can be combated by using a medical cabinet, and in Survivor you're not really gonna see too much trauma damage, but in Veteran it stacks on really quickly. While that is the main difference between the first two difficulties, there are significantly more ridden and especially special ridden in Veteran difficulty, and in Nightmare I can imagine it gets quite a bit crazier as well. If you're just looking to learn the game, there's nothing wrong with starting on Survivor, but just know that the game really starts at Veteran. I will say, however, since the beta has what is essentially, I would assume, 2 campaigns kind of slammed into one, so you're going to be doing 8 levels in a row, the second 4 levels, the second campaign, I'm assuming, is a massive difficulty spike. I feel like that's what it's like trying to play on Nightmare. So if you're playing on Veteran, and you manage to make it through the first 4 levels, and you go on to the second 4 levels, it gets really brutal really quick. Which leads us nicely into the card system. One of the ways that you can combat the difficulty of this game is by using cards on yourself. Bear in mind the enemies also have cards, but we'll get back to those in just a little bit. These cards will give you and your team various buffs, and you can put them into a deck of up to 15. With that said, it's generally not a very good idea to max out your deck and instead go for, 7 to 10 cards that are well focused on your build instead of trying to just cram as many cards as you can in. These cards could be anything from giving you a combat knife, which is pretty much mandatory in my opinion. The combat knife is basically a free melee. It does take stamina, but it's so much better than your standard melee, and it can actually kill zombies right off the bat, resulting in you saving quite a bit of health. Another card, for example, is whenever a teammate goes down, it heals your allies over time for about 25 health, which is not at all insignificant. So you get the idea. There's a lot of different cards that you can choose from with a variety of effects, some of them positive, some of them very powerful, but also come with very powerful drawbacks. For example, they have the first aid bag, which gives you 40% healing efficiency, but also reduces your maximum stamina by 20%. If you remember earlier, I said that the enemies also have cards. Enemy cards can manifest themselves in many different ways. The most common one that we saw in the beta was the card for more alarmed doors and more birds around. If you startle the birds, basically it calls a horde. If you start a car alarm, it calls a horde as well. So you're going to want to probably avoid that. But those are the 2 most common in the beta. You also had some cards that were not necessarily good or bad for you, just kind of challenge cards that you would get at the beginning of each level. Say if you get to the end of the level without going down, then you would gain 500 free credits at the end of the round, which is very nice. It seems like you managed to get at least one of these kind of challenge cards at the beginning of each level, just to add a little bit of extra spice to the gameplay, which I think it does a pretty good job of. I noticed that my team would move a lot faster whenever we were under a time crunch, and be a bit more careful and, kind of calculated whenever we didn't have to worry about the clock. Overall, while the card system was kind of a sticking point for some people, I really like it. I think it's going to be a lot of what the longevity of this game has to offer, basically. As you play, you're naturally going to get better cards, and as you get better cards, you can challenge these harder difficulties. I can tell you right now, you're going to need some of those cards. Overall, I'm really excited for Back 4 Blood. I cannot wait to get my hands on the full release, and hopefully they kind of address some of those enemy concerns that I have. I guess one more kind of gripe that I have with the game is that the gun sounds aren't amazing. They're not bad, but they don't give you that feeling. They're just okay, Overall, the game was very fun. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait for the actual full release here in a couple months. With that said, thank you so much to my patrons, channel members, and Twitch supporters for supporting me all along the years. Wow, you guys have been around for a little while, and I really appreciate that. Leave a comment, let me know what you think of the game, let me know what game you think I should cover next. I'm Newbornkilik, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.